Hello, welcome to yet another video with Dr. SamsonUdho. I'm so excited to share with you today's video. In this video, we are going to discuss how you can write a very compelling discussion for your research finding. This is a part of research that I dreaded for a very long time, simply because I didn't know how to handle the different parts of a research discussion. And so I would postpone the write-up until I'm closer to the deadline, and then what I produced at the end of the day was not as exciting as I wanted. But over the years, I've learned the nuggets of how to write a research discussion in a way that is concise, in a way that is logical, in a way that will make your discussion stand the test of time. Whoever reads your discussion will find merit in your discussion, and even if they're supposed to make any changes, will be one or two minor changes. Today, I will show you how you can do that in 5 simple steps. Now, when you have your research findings, there are 4 simple steps that you can follow to write your research discussion. The first one is that you have to be able to interpret your finding. When you're writing your research discussion, you simply require to do the first thing first. Restate your finding in a way that shows that you understand the finding and you are restating it for an ordinary citizen, layman's language. So the first thing you have to do is to restate the finding, is to interpret the finding. For instance, if your study was on prevalence of intimate partner violence and your prevalence was say 50%, you see, prevalence of 50% makes sense to researchers and people who have gone to school. But to your parliamentarian, 50% may not make a lot of sense. So the best way maybe to interpret that finding would be by you saying 1 in 2 women experience intimate partner violence. So you see, what I've done with that result is that instead of me stating it the way it was in my result section, I'm now trying to actually interpret that finding. So the first thing you have to do is try to make sure you interpret your finding. The other example I would give is, for instance, you're doing odds ratio association. Let's say intimate partner violence is associated with a history of alcoholism in the family. And maybe say you find an odds ratio of 2.5%, very nice p-value. So you say, instead of saying, in my finding, the odds ratio is this, the p-value is this in your discussion, that doesn't count. At this point, you want to just interpret this finding in a way that any other person would understand. And so with your odds ratio of 2 point something, you could say people with a background of alcoholism are 2 times likely to experience intimate partner violence. So that's the first part of your discussion. Interpret your finding, and that should happen in simply 1 sentence. Don't overflow with your first point. Make it in 1 sentence. After you've stated that finding, after you've interpreted that finding, the second step is, can you justify your finding? Can you explain your finding? Can you make sense of your finding? So in simple terms, explain your finding. Why do you think you got a prevalence of 50% for intimate partner violence? Why do you think the odds ratio is 2 plus for people who have a background of alcoholism? So that is the second step. Explain your finding. And so I could give another example and say, with my prevalence of 1 in 2, say 1 in 2 of people here experience intimate partner violence. This finding is plausible because of the history because of the low socioeconomic status here, the weak police system, and the low level of education of the women that make them very vulnerable to intimate partner violence. But what you need to do is try to explain your finding. I don't know what kind of research you will be doing. After you have done that, then you can move to the third step, which is the common one that everyone knows. Compare and contrast your finding. Try to compare your results with previous study. And there are 2 outcomes you can get at that step. Either your results is consistent with other findings, meaning they're similar to other findings, or your result is not consistent with other findings. That means that there's a disparity in finding. So if your result is consistent with other findings, then you move to the final step, which is step 4. But if your result is not consistent with other findings, you find there's a significant disparity between your results and that of other researchers, then you need to justify the differences. Why do you think there's differences in finding between your study and other studies? And the difference, the justification for that differences should be rooted in the methodology of your study. Don't justify the differences based on other people's studies. Justify it based on your study. We got a prevalence of 50% because the tool that we used was easy to administer. Maybe the tool that we used was this. Maybe this population is this. But justify it based on the methodology of your finding. So the justification that you give at that stage is more methodological than scientific. This is very important. And so the explanation that you give for the disparities in finding is more methodological, is more rooted in the differences in methods between your study and other studies. Remember, if you're talking about methods, you're talking about the population, you're talking about sample size, you're talking about sampling, you're talking about data collection method, data collection tools, quality control checks. So all these are things that can cause differences in finding even when we are studying the same concept. So look at your study and other studies and see whether there are differences in the methods. And that will be the basis of justification of the differences between your finding and other studies. Finally, once you have dealt with the comparison, you move to the final step of discussion, which is to give the implication of your finding. What is the implication of your finding? Implication is different from recommendation. We are simply saying, so based on your study, what do you think should be happening? Implication is very similar to recommendation, only that in this step, you're not really committing to mentioning any stakeholder who should be doing something. For instance, in our example of intimate partner violence, you could say, the high prevalence of intimate partner violence in this context suggests that there is need for more work to strengthen family relationships in order to eradicate intimate partner violence. That is an example. So you see, you're trying to really tease out the potential recommendation that you will put later for your discussion chapter. So the last part of a discussion is the implication of the finding, not the recommendation. So this is the most straightforward way of handling your discussion section. As you get more experience in writing a discussion, you can start to switch the different parts here and there. You can even begin with step 2 and come back to step 1. You can begin with step 4 and come back to step 1 and 2. That can happen once you've mastered the art, the different approaches and nuggets of writing a discussion. But if you're a beginner and you want to be more straightforward with your discussion, these are the 4 major steps that you should undertake. 1, interpret your finding. 2, give explanation for your finding. 3, compare and contrast your findings. And finally, give the implication for your finding. So this would be my takeaway message for writing a very good discussion paragraph for your study. And this should happen, by the way, in just one paragraph. Don't when you are making one paragraph, 1 point for your discussion. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, look forward to seeing you in the next video, and please give us a thumbs up, and we'll continue to upload more content on this platform. Thank you very much.